George Washington Hotel, for Lutze 89 and Deke '93. Sirens and squeals, but no merry-go-round. Fire engines that cannot be stopped roar into the checkerboard pattern. A building labyrinth, dust in the halls of the George Washington Hotel, where I am dying the death of the last Berlin artist, because my daily breakfast downstairs at the Hermitage does not agree with me. Lutze, 89, may forgive me, even if Rosa yesterday reached out for her with fecal fingers. Nothing could be done at the new school. Thomas, 93, and Katinka, 97, were let down. I am not mounted by bearded Paul, because my Grapho 30 is glistening so far away, closest to the phallic steel. New York is no miracle of love. It is the yearning of the blue flowers aroma which I like to fart. I could smash myself and smear the pap on the facades, but would the friend Rebecca recognize my efforts in such an obscure restaurant like the one last night, when happiness at first sight flashed on in Melanger's eyes? I know, Ottchen, 36, you won't be able to understand all this, and Bernd, 87, is certain to get a postcard from Bloomingdale's. But why isn't anybody writing to me in this desolation? Now what I climbed down from the World Trade Center in a state of and confusion and can no longer be saved. Now that only one way is left to go, the way to eternal copulation, which, raping myself, I am avoiding like the devil. Sweet blonde Lutzilde, 89, if it weren't for you carrying the iron pillars around me, so host debris would be bespattered by me, for it would take only the slightest touch of a little finger on my ass, and New York's electro cityscape would moan under me. Forgive the brutality of the last sentences I thrust out. Forgive me for deceiving you and withholding the most important thought, how beautiful it would be to work at PS1, but that is beside the point. Martin Ensor Bonacaros is here, which explains New York's trembling. For how long will this city be able to conceal the entrance to hell? Everybody could find it, provided they can recognize it. Under the ramp to Brooklyn Bridge, the horses of the Orcus, disguised as police horse, are standing in Wyoming cages, waiting to be mated, while overhead the cars are rushing towards Pace University with its overcrowded faculty. I could not take my eyes off the black caverns. I had to be sucked in and helplessly allowed myself to become engulfed by that damned railroad station. And you must understand that I do mean the entrance to hell. It is a sub-basement for the trains underneath Grand Central Station. Be careful there and don't get caught. Rather sing the final from the Passion according to St. Matthew before entering. Do cry, do sob, stick a paper flower from Bloomingdale's into the hair of your pubis. Do stand in front of the Pan Am building naked and thank Gropius for his tower. Lie down in front of the wheels of the railroad engines. Schrei, cry, exult, rejoice, shout, sprinkle yourself with holy water, for our Savior lives, is rising from the dead and ascending towards heaven in the yellow of Grunewald. Consider the welfare of the saints. Don't be arrogant. Be careful when you enter Grand Central Station. Rush quickly past the swinging doors, for behind those doors is a suction pulling us into the blackness. Only a cross remains. It is to be erected in honor of the holy city, New York, in honor of the friends who helped and who built ties and sewed and sprinkled and who in the end became Berlinesque joys, Lutzhilde and Katinka and Thomas and I. And I want to name it and love it and caress it. Anglicisms may express one thing, while I mean something else, something that is staying behind forever and always. Besprinkled soul, brutalized sense of hearing, shabby rest, New York's remains. In the sign of the cross, of the phallic fork, the wings are beating, brutality of the transverse beam. New York pleasures, the fire in the air, Neuschwanstein Castle on Wall Street ramparts, a temple, a breeze, a vibration in the universe. Who can relieve me of my compulsions, of the penetrating fog? The Bowery poverty still seems bliss to me. I want to surrender myself. New York is an anchor. The ground is mud and fine grains of gold. As an example, that place supposedly no longer exists. Take some vehicle and visit the banks of the Hudson and nonchalantly stop at the old building on the hill of Fort Tryon Park. Taste the icy blue of the river. Inhale the pungent aroma of the brown risen. Close your ears. Don't scream again. Chase away now the ambulances. The hospitals are not far. Shall I perish there without having spoken even one sentence in honor of the sacrificed? Shall I sing in the refugium? Shall I meditate in the Pyrenees, in the monastery of Cuxa, dedicated to Saint Michael, in the yellow golden sun over the banks of the Hudson, with the wind blowing around the hills of Fort Tryon Park, overwhelmed by buildings and bridges, I, a crumb in the sand. insane resistance improves a more beautiful world. The exploitation becomes grimmer, the methods more refined, the torture and intoxication, profit and ideology, cadres and big brass, lobbyists and department managers and attorneys, managers and the reps from headquarters and administration, their octopus arms hidden under a cloak. This is designed to isolate objects, liberate them from their accustomed references in order to present them free of their familiar context in a pure sense which they were apparently deprived of by the most recent trends in art. The solidity of things, as presented by the paintings of Masaccio, Giotto, Uccello, Piero della Francesca, should be revived and made visible again. Carrà discovered in Uccello's work the brotherhood with objects, a feeling that instills objects with psychic warmth. Dear R. 90. The strain of breathing, an exhilarated pulse, and euphoric expectations are the result of the quiet but unstoppable destruction of any tenderness which the department store must have eliminated in order to have its own blood flowing through my veins. I believe to have come to realize that, should I remain here, my love for the environment of my body and of my soul would be turned off by closing a faucet of velvet and bric-a-brac in order to foster my passion for the glistening neon lights, suffocating textiles, cutting glass, piercing kitchen utensils, and a confusion of porcelain. If the full-time effort at the department store would allow me an equal amount of free time, I could perhaps develop and cultivate enough desire for the marketable ornament, for scheming personnel management, humiliating or buying of orders, and tortuous uncovering of customers. 12 years, however, are enough, and I have to watch out. The pleasure of one's demise could be enjoyed thoroughly in a department store. Why do so many people die soon after retirement? The soul remains viable only to the degree tolerated by the department store. All those substitutes, replacements for lovers, husbands, parents, children and friends, given the boot, they fall easy prey to the scythe of death. Scythe of death. Dying to me is an act of love. The others are not granted to see death as the ultimate aim of their longing, they are completely involved in the soul-corrupting business. In a way, I would find it intriguing to continue here. However, I fear that my energy reserves are being depleted, and an end with social security at age 63 and an impersonal coitus with a friendly reaper would be even the more pathetic, as my life could have been different. It is becoming increasingly difficult for me to submerge myself into the prelogical mentality, then to break through the limits of consciousness. After many hours of meditating, I am able to perform one stroke of the brush. It is becoming more difficult to present dreams, to communicate, but also to arouse and to shake up. The leaping fountain on a recent night showed me myself in the company of a once very beloved relative, 61. I was a double image, hiding from myself and from her. Therefore, there must be doubts, and I must rid myself of these doubts, and I must get out of this treadmill. What is ultimately important? I am not myself. I am no longer in Berlin and not yet in New York. Everything is contracted within myself. When I think of Otto 36 or Rainer 94, I don't know what I shall do. I am not traveling in jeans to the US. What would we say if an American come along visiting us in a Bavarian costume. I'm scared stiff of the customs inspection. One big suitcase, a smaller one bag of the same size, packed so full that it hardly closes the roll, if it is still there, to unpack it, and then to drag it all from the conveyor belt to the taxi. That all makes me crazy. A lot of writing. Are you writing a book? Something like this. Movie? Yes. In the windmills of your mind, and that is it, what I'm longing for. At 2 p.m. I shall be landing there, and then can only turn to fire, bunch textiles, and dreams of the Washington News, and to stand on one leg on Lexington Avenue, because it is there that I expect an entirely different shade of yellow. And I am finding what was not forgotten. The pupil not moving between the eyelids. They see me, and I am looking at them, and as I am passing, I think that she did see me. And this is the way she always looks. It is the way women look, particularly on Park Avenue. It is probably for self-protection that they are looking so impersonally right through me. Don't talk to me of the beauty of the blacks. The unreal matter is the imposing one. At the New York General Motors building, I must be careful, because it is here that the spindle legs are approaching, nearly twisting their ankles. They are very old and thin, and then they are wearing patent leather pumps with semi-high straight heels, at the end of milky legs at this abyss. Dear God, nobody understands that here, and it isn't that important either to take this city seriously. For what is its history, which started at the southern tip of Manhattan? I must concentrate, because there is some progress with my piece, and the kindergarten is expecting my tribute.
Tribute?
Can I expect something like that from an adult person? Well, this is the way I wanted it, and yet I did not know what waiting for me. Should I follow suit and keep smiling, or what is expected of me? Art? I must scribble on with my words, and if it were only to work the skin in the hollow of my thighs with a razor blade, so that the flow of the blood dribbling on the floor, covering on the 9th floor, forms new arabesques in the design. For what is to be lost in New York? The innocence of a provincial taste, the reincarnation of a tragedy from the antiquity, the silly laughter, the hoopoo symphony, the screaming Lizzie, 86, from the furniture department, who would never dream of Bloomingdale's coming up with yet another new monstrous campaign to butter up customers, to have the competition scrimp their hair also at Macy's, for why were the hairdressers in the basement of the Saturday Generation waiting in vain for customers yesterday? Enough for today. Indeed, enough of the usual jokes. The coffee is to be enjoyed here for the first time. I have to look at studios. In New York, in Queens, in Long Island City, with a view of 46th Avenue. That's something. What a beautiful room. It must be described with more detail later on. How the walls are standing in relation to the floor. How the angles of the windows are in relation to the triangle. The evaporation of the radiators to accelerate the accumulation of saliva, and recently the throwing of Leon's head in the same direction as 44th Drive, leading straight to the banks of East River. To see United Nations in their full splendor, glowing purple and olive green. Does Waldheim even know what treasure he has won? I am quite sure that he is unable to understand the melody of Queensborough Bridge. For how should he, an Austrian of all people, recognize the qualities of Mozart's music in the decorative ornaments of the swinging girders? He who suffers from the lack of ocean beaches and from the inability to correctly pronounce German words. Don't get angry, Bachmann. Brooklyn Bridge is like Otto Nicolai, the more important for me, for he slipped out of the same nest. That dripping, brown, reddish-brown, fishy, grain-ripe, rough-hewn, beloved for anything in the world place of birth of Occidental philosophy, the modern philosophy of the thinker on University Island. Like in the flames of Sackheim and Tragheim, running diagonally, like in one of the constructions of Saul Levitt, who is indispensable, as Lutze 89 told me 3 days ago, in our way to the south of Manhattan, to the vicinity of Clock Tower, where the other day I nearly lost my way between Center Street and West Broadway, but then walking straight ahead did come to the Flatiron Building, my obelisk in times of severe anguish. A work of art, the destruction of the World Trade Center, the blasting of the Brooklyn, the Manhattan, the Queensboro, and the George Washington bridges, if the Empire State Building would burst apart in one grandiose display of fireworks, and the illuminated upper floors would lift off and, tip first, crash into the Hudson, and a giant tidal wave would sweep away the Palisades of New Jersey and the slopes of Fort Tryon Park, and the bells of the cloisters would ring the most beautiful potpourri of tunes from Rodgers and Hammerstein, Irving Berlin, and George Gershwin, while the building is drifting towards the Atlantic, gradually disappearing in the flood of a swan song of a laudable idea of George Washington's, would be ringing and jingling loudly, trumpeting in increasingly shrieking and shrill sounds, until the din can no longer be distinguished from the howling of the sirens of all available police cars and ambulances called into action in Manhattan to no avail, for the people were standing inactively, men huddled together on the planks of the elevated roadway above West Street, and while the women were hiding in their muffs, the men crowded north dreaming of the games of the Yankees against the Royals, and didn't even know how to say a Hail Mary, and didn't know St. Christopher, St. Eustace, or Erasmus, so lovingly exposed by Tillman Riemenschneider's hands. They all did exist, indeed, embedded by God in lime-wood. These saints were swimming towards the south and across the Atlantic to the east, through the Channel, into the Rhine Delta, and further upstream, until they are fished from the water and given to the delicate limbs, the flowing stone blood, the first deed of love, to the bodies and sweet melodies the corners of their eyes and waving hair of the human couple, the man and the wife, as it was predestined. Adam and Eve, in fact, were to welcome these three on the high ramparts of the fortress, which the pilgrim once entered as the Mainfränkische Museum, not knowing that there would ever be such a reunion. Willem de Kooning, through a telescope in East Hampton, watches those limewood sands swimming towards the shores of Europe, while in the ward of a Salzburg hospital, the Fischer von Erlach Refugium, Bernhard Thomas, mortally ill, has visions of the flaming uprising of a young Berlin artist who immigrated in a pink coat from Stadthagen. A vision in yellow and orange, in vermilion and carmine, pleated rosy pink at the edge, red purple and violet blue, and ultramarine and night blue and day blue and blue leaf green and blue meadow green, meadow blue and green and meadow ochre, and meadow yellow and grain yellow and yellow and sun bright and glowing that dares the take off for the nirvana. Meanwhile, I am waiting secretly for the good news from the clock tower on Leonard Street. North America's excuse, I assume, is on one hand the presentation of the absolute coldness in its present art. It est Sarah, Judd, Stella, Kelly, Rauschenberg, Lewis, Rothko, Still, Klein, Dine, Noland, which is on apparent overcoming, possibly a tragic error, a tragicomic act of liberation from the existential values per se. Overcoming traditional European art with pop art is an honest attempt that must be recognized. Its most prominent representative, Andy Warhol, is closer related to the Czech black humor than to the Disney supermarket. All in all, there is a warmth inferiority, and on the other hand, this excuse leads to the religious mass rallies, a shocking display of people seeking warmth, salvation, and edification, who get to hear what they are longing for from efficient preachers. My need too was satisfied following the television preacher's demand. I put my hands on the screen and prayed, and it did help me. It did help, indeed. The energy traveled from the tips of my fingers all the way to my heart in this forlornness. I do not regret not having any friends here. I mean this general forlornness of people in New York. Agora and the House for the Men, the bickering of women, jukebox, music black, silk on dark skin, cocks bulging forcefully restrained by cotton materials. O colored world, how pale and sullen are the white emotions. Africa and Puerto Rico, Jamaica and Haiti are the black stars sparkling on 13th Street, above which I am enthroned with Puppy, 89, on my high perch, hanging gardens. Lutz's yellow-haired dreams past the pink-hued building, with laundry lines and geranium, and Mike's fat belly. We are dreaming a dream of decay, of the paint peeling from the yellow building across the street, placing a red in front of the paws of the German shepherd. We love the evening, breeze spiced with the cremations at the East River, where the canal flows into the oceanic waters at Roosevelt Island. Isn't she tiring of winding the tears of humiliation around the purple glance of her young curly head? We are dreaming the dream of the forsaken, the cruelly abandoned in a world of pillars that are hurting the sky, for the torturing people who are becoming so presumptuous as the disturbed gods repose, we lonesome hearts bleeding to death in the evening under the terrible sun. Purified, it sinks back into the earth near New Jersey. From our high perch, Lutze, the rhythm is transmitted to the bodies down below, to the rebirth of an idea by Beckett, which is contemplating from beer, creates the harmony of the ants in the gutter. We are enthroned up here, and the narrow dark halls behind are frightening. We are being examined by the touch of greedy dark people. We are quite juicy to be devoured, but don't you see the protective wall, an invisible grating? In fact, we are enthroned up here, my love, your tears mixing with mine, among the potted palms, the green lilies, and the velvet pillows. We are perching up here, the warm flickering of the brooding city between us. We are sitting above it and are beyond words. Cristo te ama, in white letters on a pink button on the bosom of 5-foot woman clad in black, whom I spotted at 1:10 p.m. at the corner of Broadway and Leonard Street as I was coming from the clock tower. Heat and rubber walls around me. The air does not let me escape. Dirt around me, small animals around me, not breathing, swallowing blood. Pus takes the load from me. I'm breathing hard. The legs don't want these tired streets, those Bowery corners with black coats, a bleeding shin and ghost dressing Salvation Army has semicircle lurking. I cannot breathe. The people have their emanations, and I want to cover up mine. Why don't I lie down with them? It is so easy to fight one's identity. That, in any event, is the teaching of the Lower East Side, and that one can get burned beyond healing, and that one can cut off a finger without any harm, and then you will fetch the gold from Saks, and then I will show you the very secretive place somewhere in Midtown on 57th Street that means clenching one's teeth and moreover not wanting to forgive at that moment, but in general love does come from God. And do you realize that this is the only reason for your being on this small planet? Pray that he does not take us away from this system. To understand, just look at William Blake's famous drawing, where a kneeling on one leg God is looking down, throwing something with his right hand, or letting it radiate. Nevertheless, we are not important for sure, because then I would not be thinking that my thoughts are even considering this, that something is important. I mean, nothing is possible without me, that I exist. I mean, you can either believe in God or kill yourself.
Let you say I love you. Remember your vow by the stars above you. Remember we found a lonely spot, and after our life together alive, you promised that you would forget me not, but you forgot to remember.